Hi and welcome back to the MFTF Quick Guides. Today we're going to look at action groups within tests. So to begin, as always, you should first refer to the DevDocs page on action groups. The explanation of action groups and how they work is located in DevDocs, Magento Functional Testing Framework, of course, under the Testing tab. But the actual action group page is underneath Test. So within Test, we've got our action group page here. And that'll explain exactly how these work. But if you prefer video, today I'll go through a brief guide of how we use an action group. So I've just picked a sort of random test here today to have a look at the action groups that are used in this to give a normal use case for that. So we're looking at this one here, admin create order with simple product from default source with back orders test, but we're really interested in the action groups this uses, and we'll explain what they are and why they're in this test. So we'll start by looking at this one because it's a nice simple one. Action group ref admin form save and close. So probably first asking yourself, well, what is an action group? So for us, an action group is a way to take test actions, normal test actions, but make them reusable because it's a common set of actions that have to be performed. So let's look at that with an example. So this one right here in front of us, admin form save and close. We're calling an action group test action, then passing in the ref admin form save and close. So that reference resolves to an action group in an action group file, in this case this one here, admin form save and close. It's matching the ref to the name here. What we're saying is, hopefully it's obvious from the name, on the admin form, save and close. This also requires a step key like all other actions. But when this test is generated into PHP code, what this does is actually takes all of the test actions within this action group that we're referencing and expands them into the test. So in this way, with one line, we can simply call a nice quick action, and it's doing a defined set of common actions. So let's look at what this is doing. Hopefully it's clear from the name, but looking exactly at admin form save and close. So we click a selector, save, click a selector, save and close, C element, the success message. So we have a assertion in there as well to make sure that this executed successfully. That is a good rule of thumb for your action groups. It's best, like here as well, to have an assertion to ensure that action group actually did what you expected to do before you move on to further actions in your test. You will notice that this action group actually uses for its actions exactly the same actions and syntax as a test. So it uses the same resolving these out to sections and elements within sections here. They also take step keys as usual. So it's exactly the same format and syntax as a test, except it's in an action group, and these don't run independently. They are called from a test like this. Now, if you want to actually look at what action groups are provided in the Magento test code base, on DevDocs, we have in the MFTF, Functional Testing Framework Guide again, we have an action group reference page here, and that's going to list by module all of the action groups, a link to them on GitHub, and an explanation of exactly what they do. So that gives you a reference point for using these. And it is worth noting that we do encourage you, where possible, to use Magento supplied action groups. There's two reasons for that. So first off, these have been thoroughly tested and are in use by us, so they are in their current state reliable. They're executing many times daily, so we have a good level of confidence that these do what they do and do it reliably. So this allows you to take actions in your test, for example, save and close the admin form, in a way that you know is repeatable, reliable, and has been used by us internally, so should be good to give you some confidence in those. But also, if you use, for example, this one here, and there's some change to the logic of how that admin form saves and closes. We add an extra button or a drop down to give you some options on how that happens. If that occurs, well, we at Magento are producing these action groups if you've used ours. So this change in logic here to this action group will in fact be edited by us and put out with the next batch of tests in the next release, so that your test, which very likely isn't really concerned with the admin form save and close at all, that's some setup that you're doing and you're actually wanting to test some functionality further on, well, this is going to be updated and maintained by us. So we're relying on a Magento action group that's kept your test reliable as well. Now, there are more complex ways to use action groups. We're going to scroll up this test. That's the simple form here, simply calling it by reference. Now we can do the same thing. Let's look at this one here. Again, calling an action group by reference. Admin grid filter search results by input. Again, the naming on these, and if you do create your own, because Magento ones don't exist for the actions you need to repeat, do try and name them in this way that it makes it as obvious as possible what they are doing. But we'll take this one, admin grid filter search results by input. Hope that should be clear what that's intending to do. This one, as you'll notice, as well as calling a reference action group, will take some arguments. So we want to filter the grid search results by input. So we're actually passing in a selector. That selector, you see, is the SKU filter, the SKU filter. So we're telling it the type of filter and then the value as well. So that's create simple product SKU. So you see this is actually a value that we're passing in from a create data step further up the page. So we can use both types in there. So let's go ahead and look at this and see how these arguments are resolved and referenced within that action group. So here we have it. And you see this action group now has arguments. Argument name selector and an argument name value, and it has a type enforced of string. So we can see actually within the test here, we're going to use this syntax here, the double braces, as again we should be used to for resolving things like elements and sections. Well, here this is resolving to the argument value. So we're doing a fill field, user input, and the value that's passed in as an argument, and the selector again is from the argument above. So here we have a very common action. We need to filter the grid search results by input so that we can, for example, in this case, we're going to find the product we've created by the SKU. So we want to have that to operate on, and we want to filter our grid down because it may not necessarily be on the first page. So we've done this by calling the action group, but the action group doesn't have to be static, referring only to one single product. It takes these arguments, which makes it both reusable, reliable, and with these arguments flexible. Now to note, if you do want to review these action groups, or you want to create your own in, say, an extension that you're creating in your own module, you'll see that action groups, hopefully by this point you can predict, are going to be in an action group directory under MFTF, just like sections, tests, pages, and everything else. Again, like pages and sections, they can be referenced to an action group in a different module. These, in this case, actually are. You can see we're currently in the module inventory catalog admin UI, whereas something like this is an action group that's in module UI. So you see we're referencing these from different ones. Of course, be aware of your dependencies when doing this, but that's quite normal that we would do so. Now, we do have to note that action groups, if you're going to write your own, they do not nest. What that means is you cannot call an action group from an action group. So in this case, doing something like this, and then trying to have this action group have another action group is not going to work. That's going to throw a hard error, that's going to fail generation, and it's never going to work. So that is invalid. And if you are creating these action groups, The best practice for using them is that they should be small and that they should be reusable. There's little point having an action group if it's not going to be reusable, because in this case, trying to read through exactly what our test does, while this hopefully is a useful name that we can deduce what happens, to actually debug this and see exactly what's going on or read through the test, we have to open up the action group file to see what's going on there. Now, in Allure reporting, this does expand and give you all of the steps. That's the expanded action group steps from here in the test. But for debugging XML and something like PHP Storm, it's less convenient. So make sure you're using them where they are reusable. Only write your own where Magento supplied action groups are not already available. And you really need to keep them atomic. So we want them doing only one set action and then making a quick assertion and completing. It's not much use to have an action group that does a long sequence of actions. So if we take, for example, all of the actions that happen in this test before, we should not create an action group for all of these. It's overly complex. If we try and make it parameterized, then that's going to require a lot of parameters and be difficult to debug. And it's going to be too big to be reusable often. So we want to keep them nice, quick, atomic, so that they're reusable and easy to maintain. Now, that's been a quick look at MFTF action groups. Thank you for joining, and I hope to see you next time.